on Primetime Politics, preparing for the pain.
This allows workers to keep their jobs and the benefits that come with them.
The federal government unveils its plan for worker and business support as the trade war with the U.S. shows no signs of letting up. On the program, we'll speak with former Chretien Chief of Staff Eddie Goldenberg. We'll get his thoughts on dealing with Trump and what he thinks the new Liberal leader will have to do once chosen this weekend. And our Ottawa Bureau Chiefs will share their insights on the trade war. This is Primetime Politics. Hello, I'm Michael Serapio. The federal government introduced a multi-billion-dollar aid package today, money for business and workers, as Canadians brace for the impacts of the trade war now underway with the United States. Now, the package includes a new trade impact program worth $5 billion over the next couple of years, lower cost loans through the Business Development Bank of Canada worth $500 million, $1 billion to help the agriculture sector through Farm Credit Canada, and some EI benefits for workers who switch to shared work programs if employers have to reduce hours due to the trade war.
Canadians can rest assured that we will match every move, check every change, attack every allegation, and react vigorously to any and all encroachments on Canada and our business community and our jobs. We may not know what our American neighbors will do, nor what new tale they will tell, but we are ready.
Minister Steve McKinnon from earlier today. Now, yesterday, the U.S. president said Canadian goods covered by CUSMA would be spared his 25% tariffs for 30 days. But today, he opened up another front and named 2 Canadian sectors that he intends to hit.
Canada has been ripping us off for years on tariffs for lumber and for dairy products. 250%, nobody ever talks about that. 250% tariff, which is taking advantage of our farmers, so that's not going to happen anymore. They'll be met with the exact same tariff unless they drop it, and that's what reciprocal means. And we may do it as early as today, or we'll wait till Monday or Tuesday.
Well, let's talk about all this. Eddie Goldenberg was Prime Minister Chretien's Chief of Staff, nowadays Senior Advisor for Global Public Affairs. Mr. Goldenberg, always good to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Great to be with you.
Listen, we have to begin with U.S. trade because here we are right now in this midst of a 30-day pause from the Trump tariffs announced earlier this week. And now Donald Trump is talking about dairy and lumber once again. But, you know, Ottawa, in response to the reprieve, did not respond in kind. Was that a tactical error now that Donald Trump is talking dairy?
Well, no, I don't think it was a tactical error yesterday to say that yesterday, the government was very clear that it would postpone the second part of the Canadian retaliatory tariffs, but it would not lift the first $30 billion. And that was the right thing to do. He's totally unpredictable. And I think the government has been doing a very good job. I think the government has the support of the Canadian people. It has the support of the provinces. And it's acting the best way it can, dealing with somebody who is totally irrational.
But did it miss a chance of showing goodwill by responding in kind to what we heard from the Trump administration?
Oh, goodwill to Donald Trump? He'll take that, put it in his pocket, and ask for something else. Okay. I think it would have been totally wrong to do anything other than what they did yesterday.
Mm-hmm. Well,
the only way they can show goodwill is when he takes the tariffs off altogether.
Yeah, and that is what we're hearing from the Ontario Premier. He says, for example, the 25% export tax that's going to be put on energy, electricity to the U.S. states will only be lifted once they start renegotiating a CUSMA. But, you know, come Sunday, your party, the Liberal Party, will have a new leader. The country will have a new prime minister. When it comes to ending this trade war, I do wonder what you think job one needs to be. Should it be a phone call to the U.S. president to try to reset the Canada-U.S. relationships? Because, you know, it seems part of this it has to do with how Donald Trump feels about Justin Trudeau on a personal level.
I think that the new prime minister will want to have conversations with leaders around the world. I think a phone call to the president of Mexico would be very important. I think probably a phone call to the president of Panama would be important. I think a phone call to the president of Denmark would be important. talking to the head of the European Union would be important. I think he will have to talk to President Trump, but I don't think we should expect that we will get anything from President Trump just because there's a new prime minister in Canada. I think the only thing we will get from President Trump is when Americans put pressure on the administration that the tariffs and the economic policy of President Trump are hurting American workers and American families. It's not going to come from Canada.
So it seems to be you're implying then, in addition to that, that really what Canada needs to do is building alliances and relationships beyond the United States. Am I hearing you correctly there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Can the U.S. relationship that lasted for, 150 years or whatever since Confederation was broken last week by President Trump. Whether it can be repaired, I hope it can. But I can't imagine that it can really be repaired as long as he is president of the United States, because you can't trust him. You can't trust him. His word one day is changed the next day, or in a tweet at 3 o'clock in the morning.
But what about beyond Mr. Trump? Is this just a matter of wait and see, or is the suggestion you're making here is that it's better for Canada tactically to not rely on the U.S. so heavily going forward?
Look, I don't think we can rely as heavily going forward. We're still going to rely on the United States. It's the world's largest economy, and it's our next door neighbor, and it's easier, clearly, to do trade with the United States than to do it overseas. But I think that it's really important to diversify our trade. I think the one thing that Trump has done he's done a couple of things for us. One, he has unified the country. It's never been as united. And two, he has demonstrated to us that we need to diversify our supply chains. We need to diversify our trade. We have to do more in Asia. We have to do more in Europe. And we have to do a lot in the United States, but not as much as we've been doing. And I think that's what it's going to be like going forward. And frankly, what he has demonstrated not only to Canada, but to his allies and old enemies in the world, is he's totally untrustworthy. You have no idea where he is going to come from. He's a bully, and I hate to say it, but it's a little bit like mafia. It's a protection racket that he's running, and you don't deal with the mafia by giving them a little bit and expecting them to say thank you.
Now, we spoke a little bit about a new leader for your party, and I do wonder, and I hear what you're saying about building relationships beyond the United States, how to proceed with Donald Trump. But when it comes to proceeding with Canadians, I wonder, once a new leader is chosen, once a new prime minister is named, is it better for that person to keep the same PMO, the same cabinet, or is it better to have a fresh start to signal to Canadians that the change is real and not just cosmetic?
Well, I think you've asked two questions. A new prime minister, I believe, should have a new PMO. Doesn't mean he has to get rid of everybody. There may be some people in the communication shop or the advanced shop that he would want to keep, but I think he would want to have his own staff. There's no doubt about that he should have a new PMO. If he wants to keep a couple of people for a few weeks, that's fine, but I think he should have a new PMO. As for cabinet, the new leader has a decision to make. He has to either he or she will take basically the existing cabinet, call it a caretaker, and say that they will make a fundamental change after the election if they win, or make some changes, next week. And we'll see. That's a choice, and that's a choice that the new leader has. The two leading candidates have obviously been thinking about, and we'll see what they do next week.
Yeah, and also. And a part of the discussion will also be a transition of power. How quickly do you think that has to happen?
I think it has to happen pretty quickly. I think what's going to happen is that the new leader will talk with Mr. Trudeau either Sunday night or probably Monday morning. Mr. Trudeau will say to him, "When are you going to be ready?" And he or she will say when they think that they will be ready, and it's probably be a few days. So I would think that the transition would be sometime during next week. But with the strong possibility of an election being called pretty quickly, the new prime minister would want to be in place pretty quickly, I would think.
Okay. Now, when you and I last spoke, you said you were supporting Chrystia Freeland. It looks like Mark Carney is now the perceived frontrunner. What do you make of that choice if it is, in fact, Mark Carney who becomes the next Liberal leader?
I think he would be. I think he'd be a terrific leader. I think Chrystia Freeland would be a terrific leader. I think the two of them far outshine anything that Poilievre will put in the window. And I think that he or Freeland will be able to show Canadians not only that they can stand up to Trump better than anybody else, as well as the fact that they understand the economy and what's going to be necessary to manage a very different economy.
Although Mr. Poilievre is asking some very pointed questions about Mr. Carney's business past, calling him loophole Carney now.
You know, Mr. Poilievre was giving coffee to people who were carrying a Canadian flag upside down in protest. Now he's starting to wrap himself in the flag. He's looking for he's looking for slogans. I don't think it's going to get him anywhere. I think he must be panicking because he's now probably sees himself as having a very good chance of losing the election. I think that nobody has had a better public service and private sector career than Mark Carney, and nobody can suggest that Mark Carney is anything but fully capable of being prime minister and fully honest. I wouldn't put. There's Poilievre talking about, what do people think in the country that he's an elitist. He's, when Poilievre lives in the government mansion, he goes to work in a chauffeured car, and he suggests he really knows what other people think. I mean, I don't have much use for the rhetoric of Poilievre, but I know that what Poilievre is going through now must be very tough on him, because he thought he was going to win. Now he realizes he has a very good chance of losing.
Eddie Goldenberg, I always appreciate the time. Thank you for this.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Okay, well, let's continue the conversation on leadership and trade. Robert Fife is the Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Globe and Mail. Tonda MacCharles, the Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star. And Joël-Denis Bellavance, Ottawa Bureau Chief for LaPresse. Hello and welcome back.
Hey there.
Michael. So, let's begin with trade here, because once again, Donald Trump is talking about lumber and dairy, and this is after putting us on a 30-day pause on tariffs. Canada not responding in kind, at least not with the immediate tariffs. Is that an admission from Ottawa, Bob, that essentially we are in a prolonged trade war and there's no use kind of bending and responding to every wave that comes out of Washington?
Yeah, look, it's extremely difficult for the Canadian government or the Mexican government or the Europeans or the Ukrainians to deal with a president who's like a weather vane. One minute he's saying this and then he's pulling it back and he's doing something else. And it's extremely frustrating. I think Melanie Joly, our Foreign Affairs Minister, said it's like a psychodrama, which it is true. Unfortunately, we're all living in this. And I think unfortunately we're going to have 4 years of this. 4 years.
You're not allowed to retire. But what do you make of the very fact that they didn't respond in kind? Because I think that raised some eyebrows. That here's Washington say, okay, you know what we imposed on you early Tuesday morning, that's now off the table. We didn't move on that. We didn't budge on the counter tariffs that were announced on Tuesday as well, Tom.
Right. We didn't budge on 25% on about $30 billion worth of American imports, but we have paused the next second phase of $125 billion worth of imports, the tariffs on those. I think that if you listen to Canadian political leaders today, none of them wanted the government to even extend the pause. Everybody now feels that we're all in all the time and not to give any concessions at this stage. So the government, the outgoing prime minister, has complete political support for what he's doing. It's interesting, though, we're not out of the woods. I mean, what Donald Trump did was retain the threat of steel and aluminum tariffs next Wednesday, and said there is a bigger hammer to come down in a few weeks, on April 2nd, when he issues what he says he's going to do, which is broader global commercial tariffs across the board in all countries. And Canada today, Friday, he has expressed that we'll get dairy and lumber tariffs as well, as early as today, or maybe Monday or Tuesday. Will that pan out? So honestly, I think that politically it was wise for the government not to let up and take their foot off the pedal. And I think that they've got a consensus in the country politically to do that.
Yeah, consensus, as you say, and it's also something we heard from the opposition leaders as well, that they
That's
don't
my point,
trust,
exactly.
and they have to keep going forward.
Well, Mélanie Joly called that a psychodrama. I call it the tariff cha-cha-cha, you know, 2 steps forwards and 2 steps backwards, and that's what Mr. Trump is doing. He wrote that book, The Art of a Deal. Now I think he will have to be able to write another book, The Art of Backpedaling, because that's what he did this week. Now, I agree with Tonda and Bob. I think the government was right in maintaining the current 30 billion tariffs on the products, and I would have not suspended the other ones, because Mr. Trump reacts to threats, and what he's currently doing is destroying essentially the trust that exists between Canada and the United States, and that's going to remain in place for generations to come. And that's, you know, it's going to take times to rebuild those trusts, if we can ever, because that a president would threaten to annex Canada the way he's doing it by questioning the borders now, I think is just mind-boggling for many Canadians. And we've seen, I've talked about this in the past, nationalism go up in Canada, and it's refreshing to see that, because I think we want to take care of our own country, our own economy, our own sovereignty, and defend it tooth and nail, bec et ongle en français.
The one thing I would say about that is I don't actually think that Trump necessarily responded to Canada's threats. I think he responded to the big 3 car maker executives who showed up in his office on Monday or Tuesday. When did the tariffs come in? It's a blur now. Tuesday. They show up in his office on Wednesday freaking out, saying, you know, we're going to shut our plants within a week. So I think he responded to direct pressure within the U.S. from the business community. He also is responding to the stock market pressure.
And
but
farmers as well.
And farmers today. But I mean, you know, yeah, the most, someone once said to me, and I think this was even in the last round of negotiations with Trump during NAFTA, that the most powerful person in the world is the last Wisconsin dairy farmer Trump spoke to. Yeah, he's responding to political pressure within his own country.
I think how the U.S. business community must be just freaking out. When you try to do tariffs on a very integrated economy, that is going to have huge repercussions. It cannot be changed in a few months. This takes years. And to Joel's point about the loss of trust, the Europeans have agreed to almost $1 trillion of defense spending. Do you think they're going to be buying American military jets or military hardware? No, they won't be. And it could come to the point where Canada says, we're not going to buy your F-35s, we'll buy the French jets.
Or the Sweden.
Or the Swedish jets.
Yeah, they've given no signal that they're ready to do
but
that,
this is
go
the
that
kind
far,
of
but
thing,
that is, yeah, exactly.
Although I have heard talk about Arctic defense, you know, because I was speaking to Lloyd Axworthy a few weeks ago, and he said, you know, we as a country have to really think about whether or not the United States is the partner that we need to be securing Canadian sovereignty in the North if they're questioning Canadian sovereignty overall.
Yeah.
So I think that's a fair discussion to have. But I do wonder, because here we have the Liberal leadership on Sunday. And the party will get a new leader, the country will get a new prime minister. Does this at all change this tension between Washington and Ottawa with Trudeau gone? Because it seems that part of this is the feelings Donald Trump have for Justin Trudeau, which are not necessarily very positive, Bob.
Well, I think it'll take some of the tensions out, because Mr. President Trump does not like Justin Trudeau. And somebody's told me that he, you know, in conversations, almost every time he talks to Trudeau, he raises the fact that, oh, your mother used to be so beautiful and she used to go to Studio 54. I mean, he's a nasty man, and so I think that I mean, all expectation, Mark Carney is going to be the new leader of the Liberal Party and the next prime minister. He may be able to have a better relationship with Trump. Not that anybody has a relationship unless you're a murderous dictator like Putin. But I mean, Trump will have known that this is a man who's guided 2 central banks, and he will obviously be impressed with the fact that he was the Bank of England governor. So I'm hopeful that we can have a better relationship with him, but it's not probably going to change his fixation on tariffs. He clearly wants to go ahead with this, and he's going to cause a global recession.
Now, I completely disagree that the Carney is going to change this thing up very much. I think that, if anything, we should not make the mistake of thinking that this is just about
No, I'm not saying that. I'm
personalities.
just saying that he might have a better relationship, but it's not going
And
to change
even
him with
then,
tariffs.
Here's why I think that it's not quite going to play out that way, because Carney will represent the very so-called globalist elites that Trump is railing against day after day in the Oval Office every time there's a camera in front of him. And so I don't see that there's going to be a huge change. And also, Carney is very much arguing the pivot away from the U.S. He's very staunchly defending Canadian sovereignty, including defense spending and the need to beef up the Arctic. And he's trying to develop a Canadian strength in the AI industry. And guess what? That's one of Donald Trump's main goals, is to make the U.S. dominant in both energy and AI. And so I don't see a big change there.
Yeah, but Mr. Carney may change a bit the temperature or lower the temperature, but I expect one of the leaders of this Team Canada to remain in place, and that is Doug Ford. Mr. Ford has emerged as the clear leader, and we'll have a federal election. So there will be a political void that will be occupied again by Mr. Ford. And Mr. Ford, as a Premier of Ontario, is a big hero in Quebec, because Quebecers feel that he's putting it to Mr. Trump like we would like it to, with the surtax that he's proposing on electricity exportation to Michigan, New York, and Wisconsin. So Minnesota, sorry. So Mr. Ford, I think, will remain the clear Captain Canada for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, foreseeable future. But let's quickly touch on Mark Carney, though, because again, the Liberal leadership is here, and we've already seen the Conservatives hit out on Mark Carney. Is that going to be a problem for the party? Because it seems to be having some impact on the polls, or at least when you look at the Leger poll, that the attack ads against Mark Carney is already biting into the bit of the lead the Liberals were regaining again. Is he going to be a boon for Liberals?
Well, I'm not sure that the attack ads are, at this point, are that effective yet. It's a little too early to say that, but the Liberals, or the Conservatives, hit the panic button because the polls show that they've closed the gap. And, all they need to do is get 33% of the vote, the Liberals, and they will have a minority government. A little bit more, and they'll get a majority. And because the way the polls are, Alberta and Saskatchewan skew the numbers, right? So when you take that out of the equation, the Liberals' fight is for lower mainland of BC, Ontario, Quebec, and Atlantic Canada. And we won't know how Mr. Carney is going to perform on the campaign trail. What we have seen from him is that he doesn't like taking questions from reporters. He's a bit short-tempered. He doesn't like being asked questions. But he's also a very, very serious guy who Canadians cannot deny that this guy can step into the Prime Minister's office and probably do a pretty good job, particularly when it comes to the economy and all the policy issues he's trying to put forward. The Conservatives are still going on this silly stuff about sneaky carbon tax Carney, and I mean they're not. They've got
Carney loophole.
Kind of got to grow up here.
Tonda, what do you think?
Well, I think the interesting polls, I wonder, aren't actually worth more paying attention to at this point, is the trust polls and where Canadians are seeing Carney placed vis-a-vis Mr. Poilievre and vis-a-vis the fight with Trump. And poll after poll after poll now is showing that there's a lot of confidence in Carney, even with all the unknowns that Bob has presented.
Yeah. And well, no, we're lucky that we will have a real campaign this time, because 6 months ago, I think we were expecting like a super majority of the Conservative Party. And the fact that the dominant issue has changed dramatically, it's not going to be a referendum on Justin Trudeau or the tax referendum. It's going to be what kind of relationship we want to have with the United States. And on that front, Mr. Poilievre might be caught in some trouble, because there's sort of about 20% of his supporters who like what Mr. Trump is doing. So, how hard can he go on Mr. Trump without losing some of his base that could go to, I don't know, Maxime Bernier? So that's going to be a difficult task for him to adjust to. But Mr. Carney, if he wants to embrace the nationalism that we have seen, I think he's got a green light to do it.
Okay. Well, a lot to watch out for. And of course, over the weekend, we're watching the Liberal leadership. So until Sunday, thank you, Bob. Thank you, Tonda. Thank you, JD.
Thank you, Michael.
And you can watch the Liberal Leadership Convention on CPAC this Sunday. Our coverage begins at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. You can also catch the broadcast on our website, cpac.ca, and on our YouTube channel. But for now, that is our program for this Friday. I'm Michael Serapio. Thank you for joining us. For everyone here at CPAC, have a great weekend. Primetime Politics is back next week. And of course, we do hope to see you on Sunday. Take care.
Over 60,000 hours of free content, the CPAC Archive is your all-access pass to the people and events shaping Canada's democracy. Witness the key turning points of our nation, the voices that sparked change, and the ideas that transformed our country. Explore historical moments in Canadian politics and up-to-the-minute content with a searchable database of over 48,000 videos. The CPAC Archives, connecting you to Canadian democracy. Find it at cpac.ca. Every week, tune in to CPAC to watch highlights from C-SPAN's coverage of the U.S. political scene, the latest developments from the White House, debates from the floor.